What I hope for Chuzalum is this, that she will be full of opinions and that her opinions will come from an informed, humane, and broad-minded place. This is how Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie finishes her book, Dear Ijeawele, or a Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions. Personally, I'm still on the fence about having children, which is, I think is understandable considering that I'm only 18. However, if I decide to have children, there are some values I would feel are crucial to imbue in them or to teach them. There are some easy ones like mindfulness, curiosity, kindness, etc. But I think there can be some trickier ones to teach, like fairness, a sense of justice, intentionality, thoughtfulness, etc. And Adichie focuses a lot on this first one of fairness for her novel, Dear Ijeawele. So, everybody, my name is Emiliano. Welcome to the first episode of Book Club. In this episode, we're gonna go through Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book, Dear Ijeawele, or a Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions. Now, I started my introduction by listing a name of values because the way that this book comes to be is because her sister writes her an email asking her for suggestions on how to raise a feminist daughter. And Adichie starts with the disclaimer that she isn't the perfect feminist and that she's not an expert on the topic either. And I'm gonna start with the same disclaimer, and I'm gonna add that I'm not speaking on the behalf of the entire ideology or movement or gender or author or anything. All I'm doing is being a vessel for the book and for the ideas in the book to reach new people that haven't read the book. And I'm just being the spokesperson for this book. And having said that, let's first explore a bit of what she's done. She, literary-wise, she's a great author. I really like her books. She's written books like Purple Hibiscus, Half a Yellow Sun, and her TED Talk is called Why We Should All Be Feminists, which is also a book now. So, again, a very admirable person and somebody I kind of look up to, which is why I also decided to start with her book. So, let's begin. So, if I had to summarize this book in 3 sentences, they would be: if you want to raise your daughter to be a feminist, this book contains 15 suggestions that can be summed up into a few pieces of advice. These are, raise her as a person, not a woman only. This doesn't mean rejecting her femininity. Rather, don't make it her only or her main characteristic. Reject gender norms and focus on equality as a main principle instead. Raise her to be a good person, to be true to herself, and to be tolerant, kind, and skeptical of the world around her, as well as inquisitive and curious. So that's my 3-sentence summary. And the impressions this book left on me the first time I read it is that I really enjoyed reading this book. I had read more complex novels on feminism before, like The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, and I did enjoy them, but I found them more difficult to read as the English is from the past, and I didn't really know a lot of what she was saying because it was so contextual. Adichie's novel, or Adichie's book, I think her message is really reasonable and not very polarized or extreme in any direction. And she presents it in such a way that it's very easy to digest. And it avoids the trap of falling into extremes that we see so often or so commonly on social media. And the messages she has, or the 15 suggestions, are clear, concise, and they strike at the heart of what she believes is the issue. And it really delivers on what the title says it's gonna be. The way I discovered this book was that I had heard her TED Talk, Why We Shall Be Feminists, and then I had read the book, or the small transcript of it, in around 2016. And then last year, in the second year of the IB, I read her novel, Purple Hibiscus, for English class, and I loved it. So I looked up other things she had done, and I picked this one up, and it's great. I really enjoyed it, and that's how I discovered it. You should read it if you're raising a small girl or boy, are gonna raise a small girl or boy in the future. Or C, know somebody that's raising a small girl or boy that doesn't have a clue on how to raise them to be a feminist and are just hoping it kind of turns out. So if you're either of those three cases, then I would definitely recommend you read it. Or even if you're just interested in the topic yourself and you want to see how you could change or how you could adapt to better become a feminist, be you a boy or a girl or any in between. Just the lessons she has are really nicely put and very concise and clear. So they're really easy to grasp if you don't have any previous knowledge on feminism or anything. So again, anybody could read this, and I think most people should. So the impact this book had on me was that, first of all, I was objectively able to learn the do's and do nots, according to her, of raising somebody a feminist and how that might look, or how to take these points into consideration so that would be the end result. So my three favorite quotes from this book. The first one is, being a feminist is like being pregnant. You either are or you are not. You either believe in the full equality of men and women or you do not. End quote. So again, that's the first quote. My second favorite quote is, teach her that if you criticize X in women, but do not criticize X in men, then you do not have a real problem with X. You have a problem with women. For X, please insert words like anger, ambition, loudness, stubbornness, coldness, ruthlessness, etc. And finally, my third favorite quote is that a woman claims not to be a feminist does not diminish the necessity of feminism. If anything, it makes us see the extent of the problem, the successful reach of patriarchy. It shows us, too, that not all women are feminists and not all men are misogynists. So again, another really great quote I love. And finally, to get into the meat of the book and my main takeaways from the book, let's dive in. So she starts off the book by saying she has two main premises that underline everything that she thinks. And the first one is that, she's speaking in first person, so she says, I matter equally, not if only, not as long as. Right, so that's her first premise, that she matters equally as anybody else in the world. Her second premise is, if a situation is reversible while achieving the same result, then it isn't sexist. So chapter 1, the takeaway from chapter 1 is that the mother has to be a full person, that they shouldn't define themselves solely by their motherhood, and that being a parent is a dual duty. So both the father and the mother, in this case, have to be present, and it's an equal responsibility. And the mother isn't only a mother. She can be anything and be a mother at the same time, same as for the father. The two main ideas or concepts I took from chapter 2, the first one is, share childcare equally. This doesn't mean 50-50, just pay attention to each person's needs, which again I think is really valuable. And the second one is, reject the language of help. The husband doesn't help. He is doing what he should. And I've heard this a lot, like, oh, the father helps all the time, or he's always around the house helping. And it's not helping, it's doing his job as a father, just as the mother is doing her job as a mother. There shouldn't be any difference. But chapter 3 has, again, two main takeaways. The first one is, gender roles are nonsense. Because you're a girl is never a reason for anything. And I agree. I've heard a lot, you can do this because you're a girl. You can't play with the big boys because you're a girl. And she says, because you're a girl isn't a reason for anything, ever. And the second most important part of chapter 3 is, please see your daughter as an individual. Measure her on a scale of being the best version of herself. So again, don't compare your daughter or your son to anybody, right? Measure her against being the best version of herself, not against the brother or the sister or the friend or the cousin or anybody else. Chapter 4 is very short, and it says, beware feminism light, which is the idea of conditional female equality. It uses the language of allowing and is fully dependent on male benevolence. And this is where the first quote I mentioned comes in, about how being feminist is like being pregnant. Because there shouldn't be some such thing as conditional female equality or conditional equality at all. So chapter 5 I think is applicable to both girls and boys. and it's one I really liked. It's teach her to read. Books will help her understand and question the world. They'll help her express herself and help her in whatever she wants to become. And I agree, I think books really open up our worldview. So again, yeah, teach your kids to read. Chapter 6 says, teach her to question language. It is a repository of her prejudice, beliefs, and assumptions. And I agree, I actually did a whole TOK presentation on language, which you can check up here. But yeah, language is really important, and so much goes goes without being questioned in our language that shouldn't be, and that once questioned, we realized can be really harmful. Because if you hear something every day for the rest of your life, or for the first 16 or 18 years of your life, that's gonna stick with you and you're gonna internalize it. So it's really important to question language. And chapter 6 continues, and it goes, women don't need to be championed, just treated as equals. The premise of chivalry is female weakness. And this is something that took me a while to really internalize and grasp, because I was always taught, as it was back in the day, that being chivalrous is great and it's something that you need to do. And hearing her and having heard other people say that the premise of chivalry is female weakness really kind of shook me and made me rethink a lot of things. But yeah, I think that's part of the journey, or part of the process. Chapter 7 says, never speak of marriage as an achievement. Really short, really to the point, and again, yes. Chapter 8 says, and I really like this too because it applies to boys as well, or to raising a child as well. Teach her to reject likability. Her job isn't to be likable, it is to be herself. Instead of teaching her to be likable, teach her to be honest, brave, and kind. And that really struck me, and I think it's really important that we do teach our kids, or people teach their kids, to be honest, brave, and kind, and honest and true to themselves, rather than being likable or popular or any of those things. Chapter 9 says, give her a sense of identity and be deliberate about it. And what this means is that you have to diversify her sense of identity. And the way to do this, and the reason to be deliberate about it, I think, is because you want to give her positive identity traits instead of negative or maybe not so good identity traits. And then chapter 9 continues, and it goes, teach her about privilege and inequality and the importance of giving dignity to everyone who doesn't mean to harm her. And again, I agree with this, and I think it's applicable to kids in general. Chapter 10 is again a two-parter, and the first part goes, feminism and femininity are not mutually exclusive. And I think society has a lot of issues around being female, and I think it's really easy to internalize that, and I think being female is bad, and therefore if feminism is good and being female is bad, then you can't be both. But of course that's not true, and that's something that she really tries to give or say or put emphasis in, that you can be a feminist and be 110% feminine, and they're not mutually exclusive. And then chapter 10 continues and says, never link her appearance with her morality, because clothes have no inherent moral value. What this basically is talking about is saying that her appearance doesn't have anything to do with who she is as a person and whether she's a good person or a bad person, and that nothing good comes out of linking the morality and clothes or appearance in general. Chapter 12 says, talk to her about sex, but avoid the particular brand of shame that has to do with being female. Teach her to reject the likening of shape and female biology. Plus, every conversation about virginity becomes a conversation about shame. And she continues to say, teach her that saying no when no feels right is something to be proud of. Chapter 13 moves on from sex to talk about love. And it says, love is not only to give, but also to take. One must give emotionally, but must also expect to be giving. And then it goes from love to gender norms. And it says, it is not the man's role to provide. It is the role to provide to whoever can provide. So again, not because I'm a man, I have to provide, and not because you're a woman, you can't provide. Whoever can provide must provide. That can be both, or that can be one or the other person, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Chapter 14, again, I really enjoyed, and it's in teaching her about oppression, be careful not to turn the oppressed into saints. Saintliness isn't a prerequisite for dignity. Unkind and dishonest peoples are still human and still deserve dignity. And I think just because somebody is depressed doesn't mean they can't do bad things. And just because They aren't saints. Whoever isn't a saint doesn't mean they don't deserve dignity. And just because somebody is bad doesn't mean that they don't deserve dignity. And this is a really important lesson that I think we could teach to everybody. Chapter 15 says, to equip her to survive in a diverse world, teach her about dignity. Teach her about difference. Make it ordinary, but do not attach value to it. Difference is the reality of the world. And yeah, just because somebody's different doesn't mean they're less or more valuable. And chapter 15 says, to equip her to survive in a diverse world, teach her about dignity. Teach her about difference. Make it ordinary, but do not attach value to it. Difference is the reality of the world. And yeah, just because somebody's different doesn't mean they're less or more valuable. And being different has no value because we are all different and we have to learn to see that. And she continues on to say, people walk different paths of life in the world. As long as those paths do not cause harm, they are valid paths that she must respect. And that's, again, a really powerful statement that she finishes with, and something I think that every child could learn and could make use of. So that's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Dear Ijeawele. I really like the book. If you want to watch more of a book club, please tell me so. And you can watch the 38 books I read in 2020 up here. And I'll see you guys next week.